Well, I'd like to welcome you to the redneck Alberta province. And I'm sure that you had a lot of fear and trepidation coming out to the Wild West. And that's probably because we have a Jewish mayor in Edmonton and we have a Muslim mayor in Calgary. So it's not so wild after all, apparently. I was wondering if you could, our Prime Minister Harper has described Israel's attack on Gaza as measured. I had a big problem with that. Can you please reflect on Prime Minister Harper and his government's unquestioning, uncritical, unwavering support of Israel? I have a problem with that. Can you help me out?
I think we should. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to fix in a moment. The obvious, you all know that the Harper government's record is wretched. It wouldn't improve, in my opinion, in any significant way, or in fact in any trivial way, if the Liberal Party under Michael Ignatieff were to come to power. I can't see any significant differences there. And so there's no point in, as I said, stating the obvious. What I would say, however, is I don't agree with part of the premise in that question, because I don't think they're supporting Israel. I think they're supporting Israel's destruction. And that should be very clear. Now, some of you may be thrilled at that prospect, but I, for one, am not. I don't. Israel's a state, it has people, I recognize. It's not a pretty picture. But I think we should try to remember, and I hope you'll hear me out. People change. We're now in the first half of the 20th century, the most militarist and racist states on earth were Germany and Japan. The most militarist and racist states on earth, Germany and Japan. And don't for a moment underestimate the militarism and racism of Japan. If you're Chinese, you will know that during World War II, about 26 million Chinese were exterminated in the course of the Japanese invasion of China. Why do I mention it? Because it's interesting, if you look at the Pew polls, P-E-W, the Pew opinion polls, they took a recent poll of 28 countries. And they asked, which countries do you think have the most positive influence in the world? Which countries do you think have the most negative? Negative, it was the usual suspects. Iran, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea. And they're always the four of them together. Iran, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea. But what's interesting was the two countries which were named having the most positive influence in the world. Germany and Japan. Countries change. So I can't either accept the proposition that Mr. Harper is a supporter of Israel. He's just a whore. He's a whore of Israel. He's sold to a lobby, a wealthy lobby. That's the beginning of it and the end of it. And I don't think if the policies he advocated are actually implemented, I think we're headed towards the destruction of the whole region. And I do believe that may be imminent. How can that be in support of Israel? That doesn't make sense to me.
We'll take two questions at a time.
Dr. Finkelstein, I have to say I was encouraged to hear about the numbers of people that showed up in the cities that you toured upon in this country. And I just want, it reminded me of something that Noam Chomsky once said about two superpowers in this world. The first being Washington, and the second one, he was not referring to Moscow or China or any other. He was referring to world public opinion. And clearly, the Canadian public opinion and what's going on in the Middle East is strengthening in favor for the Palestinian cause. The question I wanted to ask, also a travesty that's taking place in our world, are the two wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And recently, world public opinion has also voiced that 60% of Americans are starting to have doubt about the crimes of 9/11. What's your opinion about that?
You know, I don't think it's useful for us to squander energy on conspiracy theories. There's so much that we know is wrong. There's so much about which there is no debate and dispute. It's immoral, it's illegal, it's criminal, and it's savage. Why don't we act to try to, or I should say, why don't we invest our energies, which are scarce, our resources, which are scarce, in trying to undo the evils about which there is no doubt, rather than squandering precious resources and energy speculating about things for which there is a great deal of doubt and which might just turn out to be complete fantasy. I don't see it. I don't see the point of it. We don't have enough time. The powers that be, they have hundreds of years of experience in how to control us. They have huge institutions and resources invested. They have, regrettably, most of the smartest minds out there who, if they have to choose between speaking before an audience like this and going to an economic summit at Davos, well, they got the smarts. There's one life to live. I'm going to Davos. So that's who we're up against. The wealthiest, the most experienced, and often we have to acknowledge, the smartest among us. Our resources are so scarce. Most of you, if you can put in 2 or 3 hours a week into a good cause, that's what you have. You have your work, you have your family, you have bills to pay. Our resources are so scarce, so few. What sense can it possibly be to invest our scarce resources in 9/11 conspiracy theories? I just don't see it.
There are a whole bunch of people being blamed for crimes they didn't commit.
Excuse me?
We'll take 2 questions at a time.
Okay.
Dr. Finkelstein, I'd like to thank you for the wonderful presentation you made. It's been an honor hearing your words today. I've made an effort to educate myself on...
I think you should speak to the audience because I have the microphone, you don't.
Yeah. So I've made an effort to educate myself on all sides of what's been going on in Israel and the area. And I've often come across Alan Dershowitz, and I'd like to know what are your thoughts, your opinions on Alan Dershowitz and his repeated denials of the claims made against Israel and the atrocities that they've perpetrated. Thank you.
Dr. Finkelstein, you mentioned in your talk that it's now estimated that Israeli settlers control about 42% of the West Bank, and a few years ago the settler population was estimated to be about 500,000 people. I'm wondering what, in your opinion, your assessment, as best you can, I know you don't have a crystal ball, what you think the short, midterm, and long-term plans the Netanyahu government has for the occupied territories. Do they plan to try to drive some of the Arab settlers out? Do they plan to incorporate it into a sort of apartheid Israel, or what? I'll leave it up to you. That's the question.
On the question of Professor Dershowitz, for me, it's a curiosity about politics. I don't know the characters on the Canadian national stage, but every country has its characters in a kind of national theater. So in the case of France, they have a guy named BHL, Bernard-Henri Lévy. How many people have heard of him? He calls himself a philosopher, and the French call him a philosopher. And he's a kind of buffoonish character, and he's constantly exposed as a fraud and a fake. And it makes no difference, because once you become a character on the national stage, facts become absolutely irrelevant. You're just an interesting personality. And Professor Dershowitz on the American national stage, he occupies that same position. He's a character on the stage. So you go to him and you ask his opinion on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Now everybody knows that Professor Dershowitz hasn't a clue what's going on there, has probably never read a single book on the topic, including his own. What's going on. But they don't care. And that's an interesting insight, because it actually makes you very despairing of human culture, that there's such a complete and total contempt for the most basic and elementary principles of truth. That it's a kind of in-group, they all know that each of them is lying, and nobody cares. For those of you who have not yet been initiated into those ways, it's a very smarmy, sleazy, greasy experience. When I was asked to debate Professor Dershowitz, or when it came to pass that I debated Professor Dershowitz, I was really, and I know people will not believe me, I was really kind of shocked at his facility, his capacity to just brazenly lie. It did surprise me. It really did. Because he has this remarkable capacity. Some of you have heard the expression a pathological liar. How many have heard that expression? Well, everybody throws around the expression. I never quite knew what it meant. But then I'm not really trying to be insulting. I really am not. It was to me an interesting sight to observe, because Professor Dershowitz is able simultaneously to believe every word he's saying. He does. He believes every word he's saying, and simultaneously he knows that every single word he's saying is a lie. It's a very remarkable ability. And that's why he's such an excellent defense lawyer, because he goes before the jury and he has to convey the fact that he really believes that his client didn't murder X, Y, and Z, even though it's right there on Facebook. His client is shooting the gun at the victim. But Professor Dershowitz, I really believe he didn't kill that person. But at the same time, his mind has to anticipate everything that the prosecution is about to say. So his mind has to be very clear about the fact that, oh yes, he killed that person, and I better know how to answer every argument of the prosecution. And he's able to do both at the same time. Believe every word and know every word is a lie. It's a remarkable thing to observe. I was kind of shocked. When I was debating Professor Dershowitz, the first hour passed, And then we thought it was over. But Amy Goodman asked him if he would stay for another hour, and he agreed. And about halfway through the second hour, which I understand is also posted on the web, you'll notice, looking at the camera, that I'm no longer wearing the earphones. Because about a second half of the hour, I said, I'm not staying with this guy. He's just disgusting. I can't, I don't want to be around him. My skin is crawling. So I took the earphones, I flung them off, and I said, I'm leaving. Well, Amy said, get back in that seat. You don't argue with Amy Goodman. So, okay, I went back. But it was a very, if I could use the word, it was a very creepy feeling being in his presence. As to the question of what Israel intends to do ultimately with the Palestinian population, I can't tell you with certainty, but I have some sense of the Israeli mentality. And the Israeli mentality is that you keep creating facts, you keep creating facts, you keep creating facts, and then you hope for a miracle to free you from situations which you can't get out of. So what do I mean? The Zionist settlers, they come to Palestine, and they see this overwhelming Jewish population. What are they going to do? This overwhelming Arab population. What are they going to do with it? What are they going to do with it? They don't know. But they patiently build and build and build, and then they wait for a miracle. And the miracle comes in 1948. There's a war, and they're able to use the war as a pretext to expel all those Arabs who, until then, they didn't know what to do with. Come the 1960s and 70s, Israel has a new problem. The problem is Arabs are multiplying so much faster than Jews that there's a problem in Israel. What are we going to do? Israelis don't know. They don't know. But then, lo and behold, another miracle happens. The miracle is called the miracle of Soviet Jewry. And 1 million Russian Jews, half of whom incidentally weren't even Jewish, but that's a separate question. 1 million Russian Jews emigrate to Israel, and now the miracle of Soviet Jewry, as it was called, rescues them. My guess is that Israel will continue on its path and hope another miracle will come along, and it may. If a war breaks out and it takes on catastrophic proportions, and if, as you know, they're constantly saying now that the Israeli Arabs are treasonous, that's the latest thing being said, that they're potential agents of foreign governments, treasonous and so forth. They're creating that hysteria. So if a war comes, they'll use any act or create an act, if none is forthcoming, as a pretext to expel a large part of the Israeli Arab population, also the Palestinians in the occupied territories. There was a lot of talk that was going to happen during the attack on Iraq in 2003, but they weren't able to do it. This time around, it's kind of not difficult to imagine that that might come to pass.
Dr. Finkelstein, thank you for enlightening me. I learned a lot today. I'll keep my question brief. Why do you think that the Israelis, and there's a lot of smart Jewish people, as you said yourself, why do you think they keep doing increasingly defeatist, dangerous, and immoral things? Why are they doing it? Why isn't it obvious to them? What is obvious to you?
think a large part of it is, first of all, for the longest time it did succeed. Let's not kid ourselves. Force did work. It was quite successful. And second, for them, it was quite successful. And secondly, they are, a lot of them, most of them, maybe nearly all of them, they are convinced that the Arabs only understand the language of force, and that you have to keep hitting them hard. Every once in a while, you have to take out the big club and break their skulls to remind them who's in charge. If you look at the Israelis, even the last defeats, they never say that the whole concept of using force is mistaken. What they keep saying is, we made errors, we made mistakes. And if we only correct the errors and correct the mistakes, next time we can win. So now they're saying, we've learned the lessons from 2006. We're no longer the same sloppy army we were in 2006. Now we've learned the lessons, and they think, I can't say one way or the other because I just don't know. They think that this time around they can win again, and that they both think that they can win, and they think in their minds they have no choice because they do not believe they can live in an Arab world, Muslim Arab world or Arab Muslim world. They do not believe they can live on par with the people around them. They have to control them. That's the mentality.
Sorry, I would like to just take a minute. We at CJPME would like to provide you an opportunity to support our work and become a membership with CJPME, with our organization. So I'd like to take just a few seconds while we continue the Q&A, ask our volunteers to pass out some membership and donation cards. Please consider supporting our work. This is the way we can make a difference here in Canada and as well as in the Middle East. Thank you very much.
Professor Finkelstein, thank you so much for coming. You've been an inspiration to me. I came to know about you about 2 months ago, and I feel like an idiot for this. Thank you so much for your speech. I'm really worried about your career as a teacher. What I've gathered from the YouTube videos and the documentary on you, The American Radical, it seems like you're really struggling with finding a new job, a tenure-track job. I just hope that you find it, but is there any silver lining, any hope ahead, anything coming up that you suspect? Being a teacher myself, I know how you feel for not teaching, so I just hope that it works out, but any hope? Come to Canada.
Well, I have two quick questions. You mentioned that Israel will not accept a defeat in Lebanon. Do you believe that it will ever use its nuclear power? That's if it does possess a nuclear power.
It possesses about 200 of them.
In response to the first question, occasionally I'm introduced by professors, very occasionally I should add, and they say, Professor Finkelstein is an independent scholar. And then they say, oh, how I would love to be an independent scholar. To which I always respond, it's very easy. Just forfeit your paycheck for life. You're an independent scholar. You're independent of your salary. That's what an independent scholar. I don't like to play the martyr's role because I know what real suffering is. I know what my parents went through. I know what my friends in the occupied territories go through. I know the quiet, dignified suffering. The people don't wear it on their shirt sleeve, but their entire innards have been shredded. And I'm not saying this to try to evoke applause, and I will ask you to refrain, actually. I've always thought I've lived a blessed existence. I got to preserve my youthful ideals. And I've never really understood those people who, when they were young people, they talked about peace and love, about a better world, and then they just went on to be thugs. Of course, pigs, as my late mother used to say, pigs with white gloves, but pigs nonetheless. It's always been a kind of, I can't understand that. My youthful ideals were so precious to me, and the fact that I got to live them, I couldn't imagine a better life. There's the German folk song, Die Gedanken sind frei. Who knows what that means? No one? Thoughts are free. My thoughts will not hinder to do nor dictator. No one can deny die Gedanken sind frei. Now, what better life can there be than being able to say what you think? And I couldn't imagine a more miserable life if I had to go through it saying what I did not believe. So I consider mine a blessed existence, and I have to always remember, okay, in the United States, if you speak your mind, you lose at worst, you lose your job. In most of the world, where many of you come from, probably on this line, 9 out of probably 95% of this line, in the parts of the world that you come from, if you speak your mind on even the most trivial things, like the right to a piece of bread, you don't lose your job. No, you lose a body part. You lose an ear, a tongue, a nose. You lose your genitalia. You lose your head, and you lose your life. That's the reality for most of the world. So I'm very fortunate if the worst that has befallen me is losing my job. Now wait, that's not an incentive for one of you to assassinate me now.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Finkelstein.
Talk to the audience.
I wanted to really ask you, what about Jerusalem? Like, I'm hearing a lot of debates and interviews and lectures, but nobody is speaking about Jerusalem. I don't know, IPAC, I don't know if you consider it as a liberal, Jewish representative, but in IPAC they confirmed that Jerusalem is the historical capital for Israel. Also, I've seen Obama's speech in University of Cairo, and I've seen it in IPAC, and it was totally different, like upside down. And about the situation in Jerusalem, it's done. Like the West Bank inhabitants, they cannot go to Jerusalem, and they're expecting like within 10 years, Jerusalem will be no more having any Arabs inside it. Also, like just one quick thing, like what about the macroscopic image? I asked this question for Gideon Lehman, he didn't answer me at all. What about the macroscopic image? Like, we have a sanction in Syria, we have an occupation in Iraq, an occupation in Afghanistan, and in a way, creative chaos in Yemen and Sudan, and they're organizing this in a way in Syria. Jordan government is afraid from also a transfer from West Bank to Jordan. Before it was about to happen an internal coup for Hezbollah, like internally. to make a coup. And like, what about all this? And well, we have just the final thing. We have in the Arab world, I came from the Middle East, we have like a joke that Democrats, they're recovering the economy of the United States, and then Republicans, they're invading this economy. Thank you very much.
Well, on the question of Jerusalem, I do not think a little has been said. It's very clear. The International Court of Justice, in its advisory opinion in July 2004, it said East Jerusalem is occupied Palestinian territory. And they were very clear on that point. And the United Nations General Assembly has repeatedly said that a settlement of the conflict has to include the whole of the West Bank, the whole of Gaza, and East Jerusalem for a Palestinian state. So I don't think there is any ambiguity on who's entitled to East Jerusalem. It is occupied Palestinian territory, full stop. On the other question, it's true, I said earlier, there's vast institutions and resources which are devoted 24/7, 365 to controlling and increasing control over the world, which includes the Middle East. And they are stirring up trouble. It's not correct to say that's the only source of the problem. For those of you who are from Lebanon in this room, I think you would agree that the kinds of tensions and frictions which are now resurfacing in Lebanon and which may result in the breakout of a civil war again is not entirely the doings of Israel and the U.S. Yes, they will exploit it, for sure. They will make it worse, for sure. But there are genuine internal problems there which have domestic roots, not roots in the U.S. and Israel. But there's no question in my mind that they will exploit it. Actually, the one thing that may prevent the war, an Israeli attack, is if the civil war breaks out in Lebanon. And then the Americans and the Israelis are just going to sit back and they'll end up supporting whichever side is losing until the losing side looks like it's winning, and then they'll support the other side. They may end up, they may end up supporting Hezbollah to just keep the two sides bleeding. Exactly what they did with Iran and Iraq.
It's not a conspiracy.
And exactly, long time ago, before most of you, what they hoped was going to happen between Hitler and Stalin. They hoped that they would just bleed each other to death, and then the Western powers would come in and pick up the pieces. And that's what they'll do in Lebanon. So it's possible that and people here from Lebanon, how many are still here? That's quite a lot. A lot of people are writing me now and telling me that there is a genuine fear that the civil war may resume there, especially if the Special Tribunal on Lebanon indicts the members of Hezbollah.
Dr. Finkelstein, we had a question about nuclear weapons.
Yeah. I honestly, I don't want to go there, because then it's over. There's really not much to talk about.
Okay.
I have two small, very connected questions. Even though the U.S. Economic interest, security, and world respect would be in much better state if they support the fair Palestinian cause, why, in your opinion, is the U.S. ignoring the word and keep support of the Israeli policies? Second question, looking more at the bigger picture, is why? What is your comment about the saying that suggests that Al-Qaeda experience is a magnified example of the fair Palestinian struggle that is the right to use arms to repel the oppressor.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to have to just do one.
Just let me answer the question.
One second.
Hello. I just have one quick question for you.
Wait, I'm a little bit tired now. The fellow who asked the first question, what was the first question? The second one was on Al-Qaeda, and the first question was, U.S. interests. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'd like to hear your thoughts regarding the North American media, such as CNN, BBC, and Fox. Because the news that they show there is completely different than the news they show, such as Arab networks. The news you see in, on BBC, whatever, no Palestinians are dead, only few Israeli soldiers whatsoever. But in reality, like you said, 100 Palestinians per one Israeli soldier. So is this some sort of scheme by the media to cover up all the numerous Israeli war crimes, towards the Palestinians? Or is it just a coincidence that this keeps happening over and over for the past, 30, 40 years? And what can we do as students to have, the truth put out there? What can we do, to have a voice heard regarding, what actually is happening down there? That's my question.
Now, he's from Gaza, and he has we're the four siblings. One, two, three, four. So there are 5 representatives, and that's only 1/5 of the family that came to here.
So you got 2 more brothers and an older sister at home.
Dr. Finkelstein, nice to see you again, and that's Western Canada. Sure. With regard to your comments about the government and their unabashed and unconditional support for Israel, which is certainly true, not to discount the hypocrisy of politics, power politics, but I think there is a strong religious element there where there's a belief that Israel is very key to the process of Christian salvation, a very misguided conception, I'd say. With regard to that, Shlomo Sands, as you know, has written a recent, rather substantial book. And I'm wondering if you feel that book could be very significant as an influence with regard to public opinion, not only in Canada, but in your country as well. I take it, and just concluding, that you don't entirely agree with Colin Thomas's impatience with the whole situation. Your press correspondent who is rejecting
Yeah, I know. And the Helen Thomas, I'll just take that last. I never cared what she said when she was 40. So what do I care what she says when she's 99 or whatever? She was a White House press corps person. Sometimes she made sense, sometimes she didn't. What happened to her was, of course, it was appalling. But I never pay much attention to the media, which I'll get to in a moment. On the first question of the U.S. interests, and the person, the questioner said, doesn't really seem to make sense. Why does the United States support Israel when, in terms of its rational self-interest, it would be much better off supporting the Palestinians? And I think one has to make a distinction between local concerns and regional concerns. All that means, I hate to use fancy jargon because it's all mostly just to create clouds. All it means is, when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict, yes, I agree. The U.S. has no interest whatsoever in maintaining the occupation, no interest whatsoever in the settlements. And I think it's reasonable to assume that were tomorrow Mr. Netanyahu to announce that all the settlers are coming home and we're returning to the June 67 border, it's reasonable to assume that Mr. Obama would be thrilled at that prospect. And so the reasonable conclusion is that on the Israel-Palestine conflict, if the US policy supports Israel, it's mostly, if not entirely, due to the lobby, the Israel lobby. But when you come to broader interests, like Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, you start talking about oil. It's very, in my opinion, very naive to think that when it comes to fundamental US interests, the Israel lobby can be a determining factor. So, for example, when Mearsheimer and Wald, in their book on the Israel lobby, when they say the Israel lobby is responsible for American support for Israel against the Palestinians, yes, that seems to me sensible. But then they say, but it was also the Israel lobby that was responsible for the US attack on Iraq. And there I think they go completely off track. Everybody agrees, everybody knows, the two main architects of the attack on Iraq were Vice President Cheney and Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld. President Bush, he was up in his bedroom with PlayStation 2. Cheney and Rumsfeld, they were hands-on with the attack on Iraq. Now, Cheney and Rumsfeld, they have nothing to do with Israel. They're not Jewish. They don't care about Israel. Cheney and Rumsfeld, they care about US national interests as they understand those interests. Now, some people say, no, you're confused because Cheney and Rumsfeld, they were tricked and duped by all those Jews in the Pentagon and in the administration, people with names like Libby and Wolfowitz and Shulsky and so forth. They tricked Cheney and Rumsfeld into attacking Iraq in support of Israel. You could say many things about Mr. Cheney. You want to say he's a war criminal, a murderer, and a thug? Well, I'll go with you there. You want to say that he's not the kind of person you would want to babysit for your children? I'll go with you there. He's not the kind of guy you would want to meet in a dark alley? Okay, I'll go with you there. But stupid? No. You don't trick Dick Cheney. He's a very smart guy. And you don't trick Donald Rumsfeld. And you certainly don't trick them to undertake a major war at the behest of a foreign power. No, that doesn't happen. When it comes to regional interests, it's not the lobby. It's US national interests which decide. On the question of the media, yes, the media is very biased, but why should that surprise anyone in this room? Israel is a major US ally, and so Israel gets the same free pass in the media that the American government gets in the media. Let's take a simple example. A few weeks ago, I was reading a book that came out, which I would strongly recommend if any of you have the free time. It's called The Invisible War. It's about the US sanctions against Iraq. It's written by a woman named Joy Gordon. It's an unbelievable book to read. Everything that Israel did against Gaza, that whole blockade, everything was copied, word for word, everything was copied from the US sanctions against Iraq. It's unbelievable to read. There was a UN committee called the 441 Committee, the Sanctions Committee. The Americans sit on the committee, an American sits on the committee, and the committee is responsible for every item, everything going into Iraq. So, glasses, US blocks. Water, US blocks. Paper, US blocks. Pen, US blocks. Book, US blocks. Block, block, block. Until you can barely breathe, you're gasping. You read this chapter. Blocked, blocked, blocked. It's driving you mad. You remember how Israel blocked the spaghetti, blocked the crayons, blocked the paper? Everything came from the Americans. Blocked, blocked, blocked. But there was one big difference. One very big difference. The book came out from Harvard University Press, which means they carefully check every single fact because they don't want to be shown to have produced shoddy scholarship. So in this Harvard University Press book, she says, at least 500,000, at least 500,000 Iraqi children were killed because of the sanctions. And perhaps as many as 1 million, she says. At least 500,000, perhaps as many as 1 million. So you ask, the young man asked, how does it come to pass that the horrors in Gaza were covered up by the media? Now you take you 5 sitting there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and multiply it by 100,000. That was all covered up.
Right.
Who even knew? Who even cared? Between 500,000 and 1 million children perished because some creepy bureaucrat just sat on the sanctions committee, and whatever came, it just went block, 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 block. And with each block, another 1,000 kids died. Was it covered? Does anyone even know now what happened in Iraq during those years? Those beautiful years of Bill Clinton, who all liberals just loved and feminists used to swoon over. That's true.
Excuse me.
Well, that's true.
I'm not a feminist.
You know, the fact of the matter is, say what you want about Clarence Thomas, but what Clinton did was 1,000 times worse than what Clarence Thomas did, and all the feminist organizations supported him. You know, liberals loved him. 1 million kids, between 500,000 and 1 million kids, he's responsible for their death. You know, and who knows? If we can up the figure to 2 million, maybe he will finally get what he wants, the Nobel Peace Prize. And the last question is, what can we do? Well, I'll tell you what you can do. For starters, you can join CJPME and work. You're smart. I'll tell you, it's a very impressive show now. I travel around the country a lot, around the world. Young Muslim, Palestinian Muslim students, very smart. A very impressive show. It's a very, it's always at the top of their class. always well-groomed, always respectful, and always have a very healthy look about them. I look at these 5 kids, you know. They have that healthy look about them. They're good, healthy human beings. And they do very well in school. Very respectful. You know? Yeah, it's good. Even when I have disagreements, some of you know the case of the young Muslim students at Irvine, University of California, Irvine, who shouted down Michael Oren, and then they got expelled. I didn't really agree with them because I think our most powerful weapon is the ability to speak, and we shouldn't jeopardize it by shouting people down and then being denied the right to speak. But I met them when I went out to Irvine, and I have to say, they were very serious. These were morally serious people. You could disagree with them, but they were morally serious, they were smart, they were committed. I asked them, do you have regrets? Because, you know, they were suspended. They said, no, we have no regrets at all about what we did. And they didn't say it in a smart alecky way, you know, like in a kind of infantile defiance. No, they said it as, we thought through what we did, and we felt that after what happened in Gaza, no, we should not be coming here under the sponsorship of this university. It's a very impressive bunch of young people now. They're knowledgeable. My generation was very stupid. You know, it was. We went around shouting slogans like, everybody should know, we support the PLO. It was dumb. Because it was totally irrelevant. The issue is not who I support sitting in New York. The issue is who the Palestinians support. These are dumb slogans, and the only purpose seemed to be is, you know, to get yourself killed in New York. You go around shouting slogans like that. I used to wear buttons that said things like that. I was terrified on the subway platform. I'd say, okay, I'm going to wear this button. I don't care what happens, but maybe somebody can push me. But young people now, they're knowledgeable. They know facts. They know how to argue, they study, they learn. I wish you would read books a little more. I mean, everyone comes up to me and says, Professor Finkelstein, I've seen all your YouTubes. Every one of your YouTubes. Okay, have you read one page of any of my books? Books! I wish I would read a few more books, but they're smart, they're knowledgeable. I like to hear the young woman, biochem, young man, math, yes. He wants you to be the top. I want to see the women in math and biochem in particular. I'd like to see that. And I think you can do a lot. Very smart. And just good. Good. It's a generation that has not yet been corrupted. I'm a little fearful about the next one, but this generation of Palestinian Arab Muslims, it's a good generation. And I think if you put your mind to it, you're clever enough, you're smart enough, you have the energy, you can do a lot of great things. I'm very confident about that.
All right, I think we can take the 4 last questions if we commit to answer in 10 minutes.
Yeah, just ask them one question each.
Okay.
Yeah, I have just a quick
question.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Finkelstein. Briefly, I have one question. So some historian politicians are saying that Israel has been going through a self-destructive process. And also, like, there is the argument as well that U.S., the main friend of Israel, are starting to judge Israel more as a liability more than an asset. So I would like to know your opinion in this.
Okay.
In your presentation, you said that approximately 12 to 18 months from now, Israel is probably going to attack.
I didn't say it's a Daniel Kurtzer. the
Okay.
former U.S. ambassador to Israel.
Okay. Now, and you also said that if that happens, you're going to have Israel for sure wants to win, and then but then you're going to have Iran probably help out Lebanon, and then in that case, this is all going to happen in approximately like 2 years. And you said that the solutions. I'm hoping this is all my misunderstanding because this all seems extremely grim, but you're saying that the solution is public opinion changing and us pushing our governments. Now, in 2 years, the elections, there's going to be elections, for Obama, rerunning, etc. Do you think, let's hope, hypothetically, let's say this ambassador's prediction comes true? How grim is everything looking at? What could we possibly do?
Do we have another question? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Finkelstein. That was an excellent lecture. I'd just like to ask, have you ever go to Israel? And have you met the leaders of Israel? And do you care what they think about you? What do you think of Jimmy Carter? Obviously, you do very similar work to your work. And then finally, I have a difficult question, which is, sometimes you like to speak freely, but how do you get around that when you criticize Israel, then you always target it without even questioning anti-Semitism? Thank you.
Arabs are Semites too, by the way.
On the question of whether Israel is now becoming a liability for the United States, yes, it is true that the Israelis are acting in such a reckless fashion that there are more, you might call it, defections among American political elites, people who are raising the question of whether or not Israel is causing the U.S. Excessive amount of harm, and it's time to either dispose of it or rein it in. We haven't yet come to what's called a tipping point, but certainly elite opinion. You can see many people. The most notable example after the attack on the Mavi Marmara was a guy named Anthony. I just had a chapter in him in my book, and I can't remember. Anthony Quartersman. Anthony Quartersman, who's a major. I'm tired now. That's just a little exhausting. Anthony Quartersman was a major military analyst. He was very harsh in his criticism of Israel after the Mavi Marmara attack, and saying, Israel, you better remember who pays the bills around here, and you better cut it out. So the opinion is changing, though it's not yet at the point where the U.S. is about to dump Israel. As to my prediction, and where does that leave prospects? It's a prediction. I hope I'm wrong. What can I tell you? I hope I'm wrong. The Hezbollah does believe that a war is inevitable, but they still believe it's not imminent. They say it's in the medium term, not the short term. With all due respect to Mr. Nasrallah, I don't agree with his reasoning. His reasoning is that Israel is not prepared to take massive civilian casualties. And so long as Hezbollah makes clear that in the event of a war, they will suffer major civilian casualties, he thinks they will not attack. In my opinion, that's a mistaken assumption, because in fact, Israel or Israeli leaders want major civilian casualties, because Israel is now so isolated internationally, and it would be judged so harshly if it launched an attack that it needs massive civilian casualties in the order of hundreds in order to justify, in international public opinion, the annihilation of Lebanon. So I think he is incorrect in the assumption that not the threat of civilian casualties will deter Israel. I think it's just the opposite, that Israel wants the massive civilian casualties, which of course it will play very big in the international media in order to justify the complete annihilation of Lebanon. As to the last question, I very much doubt that Israeli leaders even know who I am. And it's just as fine if they don't know. As for Jimmy Carter, I think it's an important point, and we'll end on that note. Carter has obviously been saying and doing very decent things, for sure. But we should also bear in mind that Carter is a politician. It's in his bones. He can't free himself of that. That's his being. He's a politician. Why do I mention that? Because I do not believe Carter would be saying the things he's saying were it not for the fact that he knows there's a lot of public opinion out there that agrees with him. They may not say it as vocally as he does, but he knows, because of the circles he travels in, he knows that there's a lot of public opinion that agrees with him. So when he came out with the book, Palestine, Peace and Apartheid, he's a very calculating person because he's a successful politician. If he put apartheid in the title, he knew that there were a lot of people who were thinking the same thing. And in fact, the book was in the top of the bestseller list, sold 300,000 copies. That's not a small amount. So that should also be an encouragement. There's this huge mass of amorphous, that means unformed, public opinion that's ready to be reached. And if we're principled and reasonable, I think we can reach it. Thank you.